Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Richard Thompson here from the college, and a very warm welcome to you here in the Dorchester Library. And judging by the luminaries who are about to follow me, you can see what enormous effect Chris Booth, who I knew, had in the 20th century science and medicine. And what more appropriate place to have this memorial meeting than the Dorchester Library, the central historical part, if you like, of the modern college, because, as you know, Chris was a Harveian librarian and a very distinguished historian as well.
I'm today, as I was in the past, in Chris's spirit. And in Chris's spirit, I will be saying, watch your time. I can remember, as I'm sure all of you can, exactly when I met him first. I was in Cardiff, and I was told by Pat Forrest, who was a fellow St Andrews graduate and a surgeon, to go to the Medical Research Society, where Chris was demonstrating the villus atrophy by very simple microscopy of intestinal mucosa. And Forrest said, you should go and see that. And I said, well, but how will I recognize them? He said, oh, it's easy. Just think of Trevor Howard. And Tim Cox and I were very privileged to see Chris exactly 2 weeks before he died, when he still had that sharp, intelligent, penetrating look, which James Scott has really summarized in the title here, What's New? He always wanted to know what was new.
Chris Booth's office was first on the right, and I can still remember clearly across nearly 30 years his first words to me, don't think that I'm a gastroenterologist. I start at the pylorus and I finish at the ileocecal valve. Chris used to bounce into the lab from time to time with a sort of cheery greeting, which was quite hard to answer sometimes, saying, what's new, eh? What's new, chaps? And as I said, sometimes, very often one said, you know, there was not much was happening, but on one occasion, an elderly lady came in with osteomalacia, megaloblastic anemia, and steatorrhea, which was shown to be due to an ileal stricture. Now, this case fascinated Chris. That was a word which he used very often. And this was partly because the lady's megaloblastic anemia was due to malabsorption of vitamin B12. And he and David Mollin were the first to show that the site of absorption of vitamin B12 was in fact the ileum. So he was, as I say, fascinated by this case, and he encouraged me to collaborate with Barry Lewis and develop a vitamin D absorption test and show that, in fact, this lady's osteomalacia was due to severe malabsorption of vitamin D.
Chris was very much a Flexitarian creature, and he taught the Flexitarian ethic, and it certainly had a major effect on me, and I think it had a major effect on everybody at the postgraduate medical school. Chris was also, we don't need that yet, well aware of the dictum I first heard from Henry Kunkel, that knowledge does not travel only from the laboratory to the clinic, but also in the other direction, and that the study of rare diseases and unique experiments of nature could be of great value in elucidating pathological mechanisms. He was also deeply imbued with the idea of education in postgraduate medicine in addition to training, and he did wish those, as all good teachers do, who worked with him to see further and to go along a path that he himself would not have been able to envisage. And all this was illuminated by his very considerable knowledge of the history of medical science, which he took up professionally in later life.
And Chris, of course, was very interested in results. He was very interested in new things, and he would have very much liked the title that, James, you suggested, What's New? And what's new is that these gut hormones that he almost caused to exist became quite important. At the moment, during this meeting, something like 150 Europeans will have died prematurely of the complications of obesity. Maybe this is a cure. Maybe Chris has started a whole new area of research, one where the gut affects the brain. And he was very keen on the gut-brain axis. So in answer to what's new is the gut is telling us how to think.
At 11 o'clock at night on B5 ward, doctor's office, there emerged this figure, and it was Christopher Booth. He did a ward round, or insisted I did a ward round, with all the notes toppling like this, and we saw every single patient on that ward and the one next door. I can still remember the names of some of the patients. Their diagnoses were utterly bizarre. I'd never heard of anything like it. There was a vipoma, there was someone with celiac disease and a carcinoma of the kidney, there was someone with a gastrocolic fistula and an amazing cardiomyopathy, and so on and so forth. There was a boy with total Crohn's disease and malabsorption. I can still remember his name. He made it. It was very tough. He was amazing. He knew everything about the patients. I was in total awe. He exuded the confidence of someone who had made a discovery, and he had made several discoveries himself. One of them, of course, was the site of absorption of vitamin B12, and much of the processing, actually, of the newly absorbed vitamin and how it gets into the circulation. It involves a lysosomal compartment. He studied it in vivo and in vitro. It was brilliant. It defined physiologically the ileum, and he always knew that he'd had a major discovery, and it gave him that confidence to ask of everybody else what they'd ever discovered. And it was tough. What had you ever discovered? What have you ever discovered that was any good? So that was terrific. The clinical practice was excellent. He was actually a very brilliant clinician, and his sensitive side came through always with patients. He couldn't have been so powerful had he not understood what it was like and what it felt like. He certainly knew about the patients very well, and they bonded with him and felt it a lot.
A young research fellow who went to work with Patrick Vallance has come back to CRC as a group head, CSC as a group head, and he said to me the other day, Juno James, up at Northwick Park, in the CRC, were the happiest research days of my life. We'd work all day, we'd go to the social centre at night, we'd talk science, we'd come back to the labs, we'd work all night and come in late in the morning. And that was what the place was like in certain sections, and it was a very happy time for me too. So thank you very much. And that's Chris's legacy.
Chris selected me to present at the 1985 MRC quinquennial review. And I rehearsed with him. With the Sheila Sherlock training I'd had, I thought I could give a good talk. But no, this was not so. So after Chris's comments, though, I gave, I think, the best talk in my life, with accolades many weeks thereafter. I regard those Chris Booth ward rounds that stimulated my interest in hematology, and his selecting me on that occasion to present at the quinquennial review of the CRC as key events in my scientific career.
And as we all know, Chris enjoyed the good things in life, like good food, good drink, and especially good company and friendship. He regarded history as one of those good things of life. He was bewildered by doctors who expressed a disinterest in history, just as he was mystified by historians of medicine who had no knowledge of or interest in medicine. Let me end by quoting Chris again. An interest in medical history is often considered to be the last of the 7 ages of a medical scientist. I have never shared that view, nor have I subscribed to the notion, current amongst many social historians, that the biographical approach to history belongs to a bygone age. I have always believed that one need not restrict one's medical friendships to those who live in one's own era.
Chris, I suspect, might have pointed out to David that there had been even fewer Harveian librarians than there had been registrars. I think it was a post he was proud of. And he was an obvious candidate. We've heard about his historical approach to medicine. a man who could get things done. And when you look at the record and see what people said about him as Harveian librarian, a laid-back approach, yes, we've heard all about that. Very un-Sir-like, yes. Let the staff get on with the job, support them, give them advice when needed, and make sure they got the credit. But I think his major contribution was to modernize the Harveian Librarians Department, the library and the archives, and the record management of the college. It was while he was in office that we appointed professionals to all of these posts. We've carried on doing that, but it was Chris who really set the modern infrastructure in place. And I think for that, the college should always be truly grateful.
But at the Guildhall, he was invited to the visit of the President of Germany, the Republic of Germany. And he describes this as wonderfully as clanking with decorations, bewildering variety of fancy dress, magnificent mixture of grand opera, Gilbert and Sullivan, and pantomime. And I think that really epitomizes his wonderful way of putting things fairly succinctly.
I think one of the great attractions of Chris's historical essays is that it's extremely easy for a contemporary clinical scientist to relate to his work, because we're hearing the voice of one of our own, someone who understands and who clearly signals the difference between science and non-science, nonsense, who recognize that the proper practice of medicine demands a combination of knowledge, curiosity, but also compassion. At one level, there's no question Chris was an iconoclastic figure. But I think at another level, his historical career was actually about reclassifying our medical icons and as a leading participant in the identification of the people that I think will be recognized in future centuries as having been the iconic figures of the 20th century. So I think Chris set us several examples. He was radical, he was eclectic, and above all, he knew that understanding the past is key to realizing the future. And when I was researching the origin of the quote about failure to remember the past, I came across another quote from George Santayana. England is the paradise of individuality, eccentricity, heresy, anomalies, hobbies, and humours. And it seems to me that that quote provides a perfect epitaph for Chris Booth.
Personally, I was very pleased when he, in 1989, I think soon after he became or left the presidency of the BMA, he was asked to spend a night on call with some junior doctors. He spent a night on call with those junior doctors, and I remember him describing how awful it was, and one of the worst things was that he had to eat a takeaway pizza whilst on call, something he found absolutely disgusting. But he wrote, "No one can function properly as a physician after 24 hours of continuous duty. It is monstrous that we should subject any devoted young doctor to such conditions." This had quite a powerful effect on drawing the attention to junior doctors' hours at the time. And I can tell you it went down very well with my junior colleagues at the time, as I was in fact an SHO when he did it.